You three are being arrested for the crime of absolutely crushing it on the AP Lang exam. How do you plead?
Guilty.
Michael, what was your first impression of AP Lang?
My first impression of AP Lang was that it was going to be a relatively easy class with mostly just grammar checks and multiple choice grammar stuff, but I was wrong and it was all essays.
My first impression of AP Lang was that it was a very collaborative class. At the start, we were doing a lot of class discussions about texts that we were reading, but then later on throughout the year, we started doing more of the multiple choice question practices and the in-class timed essays. And I think that I preferred the second half of the class more. Ryan, what do you think prepared you the most for the AP exam?
Definitely the practice essays that we did during class, because since we practiced them so much in class, everything on the exam wasn't new, so I knew what to do for each of the essays. And it was also very helpful to get feedback from Turku on the essays, so I knew what I did wrong and how I could improve.
Riley, what was the easiest part of the exam?
For me, the easiest part was definitely the multiple choice questions and the first essay, which was the synthesis essay.
And what was the hardest?
The hardest part in general was just time management. When I got to the essays, I felt like I wrote two really good essays with the synthesis and the rhetorical analysis. But then later on, when it was time for me to do the argumentative, I only had like 25 minutes, so I didn't think that I did as good on that one. Michael, what do you think that we did in class was the biggest waste of time?
I think the BFW assignments that we had for homework was the biggest waste of time, mostly just because it was review, a lot of it, and it didn't really benefit me much besides maybe helping me with one question.
Can you confirm that you were the teacher of Riley Miller, Michael Butts, and Ryan Caputo for AP Lang?
Yes, I can. They were my students in the 2024-2025 school year.
And could you provide us an outline of how these students did in your class?
Meh. They did okay, I guess.
And do you think that they're guilty of absolutely crushing it on the AP Lang exam?
I certainly hope so.
Thank you for your time. Thank you so much for joining us today. Can you please provide your name?
Bo.
And can you confirm that you were a classmate of Riley Miller, Ryan Caputo, and Michael Butts?
I was.
And what would you say your interpretations of their work was in the class?
I think it was all right.
Do you have any experiences that you could share with us?
Not many. I know I did group work with them on a few occasions.
And how did that go for you?
It was all right. It wasn't remarkable, but it was all right.
So, you think they're not guilty of crushing it on the exam?
I think it could go either way.
Thank you so much. Ryan, what is one thing that you wish you knew before taking the exam?
I wish I knew more outside information for the argumentative essay, because when I went to write the essay, I feel like I didn't have enough examples to call on because I didn't know enough about other stuff that could have been related to the prompt.
I wish I was better with my time management. We went over it in class, but I wish I did it on my own free time. And then as I was writing the essays, I got two into one of them. And so it made it so I spent more time on that one, which limited my time for the other ones, and I wish I didn't do that. How was the learning experience in the course?
For the most part, I feel like I did really well throughout the course. I didn't learn much, as I've always considered myself a decent writer and I always got good grades. But I think that I learned the most, one, from the BFW, not because it was content that I didn't know. I could answer the questions, but then I was learning the specific terms for them, which helped later with the multiple choice questions. And then also, I learned the most through the one-on-one discussions with Mr. Turku after writing essays. Just the commentary was really beneficial for learning what I could improve on. What was your favorite essay to write?
I think my favorite essay was the synthesis essay, because you didn't really need any outside information and everything you needed was in the sources.
And what was your least favorite essay?
I think my least favorite was the argumentative, for the opposite reason. For the argumentative, you need a lot of outside information and you are given almost no information for the prompt, so I found it more difficult.
My favorite essay to write was probably the synthesis, just because it was pretty much brain dead. You just had to copy what some of the sources said and make it make sense. And then my least favorite one was probably the argumentative one, because I actually had to think and have my own information instead of just relying off of the prompt.
In order of my favorite to least favorite, it was definitely synthesis, rhetorical analysis, and then argumentative. What are some tips that you would give to future AP Lang students?
I would say take the advice that Mr. Turku gives you on the one-on-one talks, and then also work on your time management. And by that, what I did was I would set like imaginary timers in my head for each paragraph that I would write for the essay, and then expect yourself to finish at least 1 minute sooner. So that gives you about like a minute to proofread and fix any grammatical errors you have in it.
I would tell them to know at least 5 rhetorical devices off the top of their head for the rhetorical analysis essay, but it's really good to know more. And I would also say that they should be up to date on like any recent issues or like other stuff going on, because you really need like outside information for the argumentative essay.
My biggest piece of advice would be to make sure that during the synthesis essay, your voice is the most prominent over all the sources. You really just want to use the sources to boost what you're saying and take those as your evidence. And also make sure that they're communicating with each other with you and just one big conversation. My second piece of advice would be that for the multiple choice questions, make sure to read the question before the text, because sometimes the question doesn't have anything to do with the whole text and just a specific section, and you'll actually get the wrong answer if you consider the context of the whole text. Michael, what do you think was your final score on the exam?
5.
Ryan, what was your final score on the exam?
I think I got a 5.
Riley, what do you think your final score was?
5.
It's the slammer for you, buddy. You're going to the big house, babe. Can't believe you thought you were gonna get away with this.